The engine screamed beneath her hands as Alara tore through Chicago's rain-slicked streets at 140 miles per hour, her husband's stolen muscle car responding to every desperate command. Behind her, Adrian Moreau's security convoy closed in, black SUVs filled with men who'd been ordered to bring back his perfect, obedient wife. But that woman was dead. She'd died the moment Alara overheard Adrian tell his associates she was nothing more than a beautiful statue, empty and forgettable. Now, as she downshifted into a hairpin turn that would either save her or kill her, only one thought burned through her mind. He never knew who he married. If you want to see how far a caged woman will go when she finally breaks free, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. The charity gala at the Drake Hotel glittered with enough wealth to fund a small country. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across marble floors, and champagne flowed like water through a crowd of Chicago's elite. Politicians with dirty hands, businessmen with dirtier secrets, and the kind of people who smiled while planning your destruction. Alara Vance Moreau stood in the corner of the ballroom, wearing a dress that cost more than most people's cars, feeling like she was suffocating. The emerald silk clung to her frame perfectly, because Adrian's stylist had spent 3 hours making sure of it. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant chignon that pulled at her scalp. Diamond earrings, a gift from Adrian after she'd behaved well at last month's fundraiser, hung heavy from her ears. Every inch of her had been polished, perfected, and positioned to reflect one message. Adrian Moreau owns beautiful things. She was 26 years old and felt like she'd been dead for 3 years. Mrs. Moreau, a silver-haired senator whose name she couldn't remember, appeared beside her with a practiced smile. "You look absolutely radiant this evening." "Thank you." The words came automatically, smooth and empty. She'd learned to make her voice pleasant without actually feeling anything. "Your husband is a lucky man. I'll tell him you said so." The senator chuckled and moved on, already forgetting her face. They always did. To Chicago's power players, she was wallpaper, expensive wallpaper, but wallpaper nonetheless. Pretty to look at, silent and utterly replaceable. Alara's fingers tightened around her champagne flute as she scanned the crowd for Adrian. She found him near the bar, surrounded by his usual circle of associates. Marco Santini, his second-in-command, was laughing too loud at something. Vincent Chen, who handled their international shipping operations, looked bored. And Adrian, tall, dark-suited, devastatingly handsome Adrian, stood at the center like a king holding court. 3 years ago, when she'd been stupid and young and desperate, she would have called him magnetic. Now she just called him her warden. She watched him shake hands with a city alderman, his smile easy and confident. Adrian Moreau had built an empire in Chicago's shadows. Gambling, protection, strategic acquisitions of legitimate businesses that laundered money so clean it sparkled. He was 34, brilliant and utterly ruthless when he needed to be. But he'd always been careful to present the right image to the world. Charitable donations, political connections, a beautiful wife who made him look stable and trustworthy. That's what she was. An image management tool. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. She pulled it out discreetly. "Stay visible. Smile. Senator Richards is watching." She looked up. Adrian was looking directly at her from across the room, his expression pleasant but his eyes cold. She understood the message. Do your job. Be the perfect accessory. Alara slipped the phone away and arranged her features into the practiced smile she'd perfected. The one that said, "I'm happy and fulfilled and definitely not planning murder-suicide." "Alara, darling." Monica Wright, the wife of Adrian's attorney, materialized beside her in a cloud of expensive perfume. "I haven't seen you in weeks. How are you?" "I'm well, thank you for asking." "You look thin. Are you eating enough? Jonathan and I were just saying how delicate you've become." Translation: "You're getting too skinny and people are noticing. Fix it." "I'm perfectly healthy," Alara said, her smile never wavering. "Just been busy with Adrian's schedule." Of course. Being married to such an important man must be exhausting." Monica leaned closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "Between you and me, sometimes I think our husbands forget we're human beings, and not just pretty decorations." For a moment, something flickered in Alara's chest. Recognition, maybe, or the ghost of solidarity. But Monica's laugh was too bright, too performative, and the moment passed. Monica didn't actually care. She was just making conversation because that's what wives like them did at events like this. They pretended to be friends while competing to see whose life looked more perfect from the outside. "If you'll excuse me," Ilara said, "I need to use the restroom." She didn't. She just needed to get away from the noise and the false smiles and the suffocating weight of being Adrian Moreau's beautiful, brainless wife. The bathroom was thankfully empty. Ilara locked herself in a stall and pressed her forehead against the cool metal door, fighting the urge to scream. Her reflection in the polished surface looked distorted and wrong, which felt appropriate because she barely recognized herself anymore. 3 years ago, she'd been someone else entirely. Ilara Vance, street racer, adrenaline junkie, the girl who lived for the scream of engines and the blur of city lights at 2 a.m. She'd worked as a mechanic during the day and raced illegally at night, building a reputation in Chicago's underground circuit as someone fast, fearless, and impossible to beat. She'd been alive then, actually alive. Then her brother Danny had made a catastrophically stupid decision. He'd borrowed money from Adrian Moreau to cover gambling debts and couldn't pay it back. The interest had compounded, the threats had escalated, and when Adrian's people came to collect, Danny had been 3 weeks away from ending up in the Chicago River with concrete shoes. Ilara had gone to Adrian herself to beg for more time. She'd walked into his downtown office in her work coveralls, grease still under her fingernails, and offered to work off Danny's debt. She'd fix cars for his fleet, no questions asked, until the balance was clear. Adrian had looked at her like she was the most fascinating thing he'd seen in years. "I have mechanics," he'd said, leaning back in his leather chair. "What I don't have is someone interesting." The deal he'd offered was simple and devastating. Marry him, play the role of the perfect society wife, and Danny's debt would disappear. Refuse, and her brother would disappear instead. She'd said yes because she was a good sister and an idiot. The wedding had been small and cold. The marriage was colder. Adrian didn't want a partner. He wanted a possession. Someone to look beautiful at his events, smile at his associates, and never ever challenge him. He'd systematically stripped away everything that made her her. The racing stopped immediately. The mechanical work ended. Her friends from the circuit were inappropriate influences who needed to be cut off. Even her clothes had been replaced. Everything she'd owned had been donated, and her closet had been restocked with designer labels chosen by a stylist who'd been instructed to make her look elegant and refined. She'd become a doll. A very expensive, very unhappy doll. Ilara pulled herself together and left the stall. She washed her hands slowly, watching water swirl down the drain, and wished she could disappear with it. When she returned to the ballroom, Adrian was deep in conversation with Marco and 2 men she didn't recognize. She started to head toward the bar for another drink she wouldn't actually want when she heard Adrian's voice cut through the ambient noise. "She's perfect for what I need her to be." Ilara froze. She was standing just beyond a decorative column, partially hidden from Adrian's group, but close enough to hear clearly. "Come on, Adrian." That was Marco, his tone teasing. "You're telling me you don't get bored? She barely talks." "That's the point. I needed someone who'd look good in photos and not cause problems. Ilara's exactly that. Beautiful, quiet, and completely manageable." Something sharp twisted in Ilara's chest. Vincent laughed. "Manageable. That's a hell of a way to describe your wife." "It's accurate." Adrian's voice was casual, almost amused. "She's like a statue. Gorgeous, but there's nothing going on behind the eyes. I could put her in this corner of a room and she'd just stand there smiling until I told her to move." The men laughed. Not cruel laughter, just the easy, dismissive chuckles of men who'd never questioned their right to judge the women around them. "You know what the best part is?" Adrian continued. "She'll never leave. Where would she go? She doesn't have skills, doesn't have money, doesn't have anything except what I've given her. I saved her worthless brother, cleaned her up, and gave her a life most women would kill for. She knows she's better off staying exactly where I put her." Ilara's vision blurred at the edges. Her hands had gone numb. The champagne flute slipped from her fingers and shattered against the marble floor. The sound cut through the ballroom like a gunshot. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Adrian's group looked over and his eyes met hers across the distance. For a split second, something flickered in his expression. Calculation, maybe, as he tried to figure out how much she'd heard. But Ilara didn't give him time to smooth it over with practiced charm. She turned and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking against marble with mechanical precision. "Alara." Adrian's voice followed her, sharp with warning. "Where are you going?" She didn't answer. She pushed through the ballroom doors and kept moving, past confused waiters and curious guests, her breathing getting faster and shallower with each step. By the time she reached the hotel lobby, her lungs were burning. Adrian caught up to her near the valet stand, his hand closing around her elbow just firmly enough to hurt. "What the hell was that?" he hissed, his polished public persona cracking just slightly. "You can't just walk out in the middle of an event." Laura looked at his hand on her arm, then at his face. "Let go. You're embarrassing me. Let go." Something in her voice made him release her, though his expression darkened with anger. "We need to talk about your behavior." "My behavior?" She laughed, and it sounded unhinged even to her own ears. "That's fascinating, Adrian. Really. Tell me more about how I should behave." "You're making a scene." "Am I? I thought statues couldn't make scenes. I thought we just stood in corners looking pretty until we're told to move." His jaw tightened, so he had figured out she'd overheard. Good. She hoped it ruined his whole goddamn night. "Get in the car," Adrian said quietly. "We'll discuss this at home." "I'm not going home with you." "Alara, I'm not going anywhere with you." She stepped back, putting distance between them. "I'm done." "Done with what exactly? Your comfortable life? Your expensive clothes? The roof over your head?" His voice dropped to something dangerous. "Or are you done protecting your brother? Because Danny's debt might be paid, but debts have a way of reappearing if people don't honor their agreements." There it was. The threat beneath the charm. The reminder that she wasn't a wife. She was collateral. For 3 years, that threat had been enough to keep her compliant. For 3 years, she'd swallowed her rage and played her role because the alternative was watching Adrian destroy what was left of her family. But standing there in the hotel lobby, with Adrian's words still echoing in her head, nothing going on behind the eyes, she'll never leave, something inside her finally snapped. "I'll take my chances," she said. She turned and walked out into the Chicago night before Adrian could respond. Behind her, she heard him call her name again, but she didn't stop. She hit the sidewalk and started moving, not sure where she was going, but certain she couldn't spend another second in Adrian's presence. The November air bit through her silk dress. She hadn't grabbed her coat. Didn't matter. The cold felt real, and real was something she hadn't felt in a long time. She walked 6 blocks before her feet started bleeding from her heels. She walked another 2 before she stopped at the edge of an alley and leaned against a brick wall, her whole body shaking. What had she just done? She'd walked away from Adrian Moreau. She'd broken their agreement. She'd basically painted a target on Danny's back and her own, but she'd also finally stopped pretending. Her phone buzzed. 13 missed calls from Adrian, 4 texts, each one progressively less patient. "Come back, now. You're acting irrationally. This is your last warning. You're making a mistake you'll regret." Alara stared at the screen, her hands trembling. Then she turned the phone off and threw it in a nearby dumpster. She had no coat, no phone, no money, and nowhere to go. But for the first time in 3 years, she felt like herself. Now she just had to figure out how to survive what came next. Alara found a late-night diner in Ukrainian Village and convinced the exhausted waitress to let her use the bathroom. She washed the perfectly applied makeup off her face, yanked the pins out of her hair until it fell loose around her shoulders, and stared at her reflection. The woman looking back at her was familiar, older than she remembered, thinner, with shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there before. But she was still there. Still Alara Vance, under all the polish and performance. She left the bathroom and slid into a corner booth. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a name tag that said Deb, brought her coffee without being asked. "You okay, honey?" "No," Alara said honestly, "but I'm working on it." Deb nodded like she understood and didn't push for details. She just left the coffee pot on the table and walked away. Alara wrapped her hands around the warm mug and tried to think. She had nothing, no resources, no allies, no plan. Adrian would be looking for her. He had the money and connections to search every corner of Chicago if he wanted to. She couldn't go to Danny because that would just put him at risk. She couldn't go to the police because Adrian owned enough cops to make that suicidal. She needed leverage. She needed resources. She needed to become someone Adrian couldn't just erase. The diner's TV was playing local news with the sound muted. A commercial flashed across the screen. Something about an underground race happening this weekend in the industrial district. Illegal, dangerous, cash prizes for winners. Alara's heart kicked hard against her ribs. She knew that world, had lived in it once. The underground racing circuit operated on different rules than Adrian's empire. Respect was earned through skill, not bought with money. Reputation meant everything. And if you were good enough, you could disappear into it and re-emerge as someone else entirely. It was insane. She hadn't driven competitively in 3 years, didn't have a car, didn't have a crew, had no way to even enter a race without someone recognizing her as Adrian Moreau's wife. But she did have one advantage. Adrian had underestimated her so completely, so thoroughly, that he probably wouldn't think to look for her there. In his mind, she was helpless and skillless. A statue, something to be collected and displayed. He had no idea who she'd been before he'd tried to reshape her. Alara left 3 crumpled dollar bills she'd found in her clutch on the table and walked back out into the cold. She had the beginnings of a plan. Stupid, reckless, probably doomed to fail. But it was hers. First, she needed a car. The Moreau estate sat on 3 acres in Lincoln Park, surrounded by high walls and security cameras. Alara had hated the place from day one. Too big, too cold, too much like a museum where she was just another exhibit. But right now, she needed to get inside it. She approached from the back, through the neighbor's property, moving quietly through shadows. The security was good but not perfect. Adrian's people were trained to keep threats out, not to stop someone from leaving. And Alara had spent 3 years learning the patrol patterns and blind spots because she'd had nothing else to do with her time. She waited for the guards to cycle past the garage entrance, then slipped through a side door she'd left unlocked months ago during one of her desperate, aborted escape plans. The garage was massive. 12 cars, all pristine, all worth more than most houses. Adrian collected vehicles like trophies. He had a Lamborghini he'd never driven, a vintage Ferrari that spent more time being polished than running, and a McLaren that existed purely to make his associates jealous. But in the back corner, covered with a tarp and largely forgotten, sat the car that had started Adrian's collection. A 1970 Dodge Charger R/T matte black with an engine that could outrun God. Alara had found it 6 months into their marriage during one of her early attempts to reclaim something familiar. She'd spent weeks secretly restoring it when Adrian was at work, rebuilding the engine and fine-tuning the transmission until it ran like a predator. Then Adrian had found out and told her to stop wasting time on man's work. She'd obeyed because she always obeyed, but she'd never forgotten how that car felt beneath her hands. Alara pulled the tarp off and felt something fierce and hungry wake up inside her. The Charger sat low and mean, all muscle and menace. She ran her hand over the hood, feeling the cold metal under her palm. "I'm sorry I left you here," she whispered. The keys were in Adrian's office. Getting them would mean going deeper into the house, past more security, with higher chances of being caught. But Alara had spent 3 years being careful and obedient and safe. She was done with all of that. She moved through the house like a ghost, using every shortcut and shadow she'd memorized, past the formal living room where she'd hosted dinners for Adrian's associates, past the study where he'd lectured her about appropriate behavior, up the stairs to his private office. The door was locked, but Alara had watched Adrian enter the code enough times to have it memorized. The lock clicked open. She slipped inside and went straight to his desk. The keys were in the top drawer, exactly where they always were. She grabbed them and turned to leave, and froze. Adrian's laptop sat open on the desk, the screen glowing softly in the darkness. She should have left immediately, but something made her pause. She'd never seen inside Adrian's files before. He kept her deliberately separate from his business, treating her like she was too delicate or too stupid to understand. But Alara had spent 3 years watching and listening and piecing together the shape of his empire. She knew more than he thought, and right now she needed leverage. She sat down and started copying files onto a flash drive she found in the drawer. Financial records, communication logs, details about shipments and deals, and all the carefully hidden infrastructure that kept Adrian's operation running. She didn't have time to read through it, but she understood enough to know this was valuable. "What the hell are you doing?" Alara's blood went ice cold. She turned to find Marco Santini standing in the doorway, his hand moving toward the gun at his hip. "Marco." She kept her voice steady, even though her heart was trying to punch through her ribs. "I'm leaving. That's all. That's Adrian's private files. I know what they are. He's going to kill you for this. He's going to try. That's why I need insurance." Marco stared at her, clearly trying to decide if he should shoot her or call Adrian first. Alara watched the calculation happen behind his eyes. "You were always smarter than you pretended," Marco said finally. "I told Adrian that. He didn't listen. Most men don't. He'll come after you. I know. And he'll find you. He always finds people." "Maybe." Alara pulled the flash drive from the laptop and slipped it into her bra. "But I'm not going to make it easy." She stood, the charger's keys clutched in her fist. Marco still hadn't drawn his gun, which was either very good or very bad for her. "Let me go, Marco." "Why would I do that?" "Because you're smart enough to know that if Adrian's empire ever collapses, you'll need friends who know where the bodies are buried." She took a step toward the door. "And because somewhere under all that loyal soldier bullshit, you're tired of watching him treat people like objects." Marco's jaw tightened. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he stepped aside. "You've got 60 seconds before I call it in," he said quietly. "After that, I never saw you." Alara didn't waste time thanking him. She ran. Down the stairs, through the kitchen, out the side door and into the garage. She threw herself into the charger, her hands shaking as she jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, all 425 horsepower waking up hungry and mean. Behind her, she heard shouting. Security had been alerted. Alara slammed the car into gear and punched the accelerator. The garage door was still closed, but the charger was heavy and fast, and she didn't care about property damage anymore. She aimed for the door and hit it going 40 miles per hour. Metal screamed. The door exploded outward. And then she was through, tires screeching against pavement as she fishtailed onto the street. Headlights flared behind her, Adrian's security team already in pursuit. Alara downshifted and pushed the charger harder. The engine responded like it had been waiting 3 years for this moment, surging forward with brutal power. Streetlights blurred into streaks of gold. The speedometer climbed, 60, 70, 80. She took a corner too fast and felt the back end slide out. For a split second, she thought she'd lost control. Then muscle memory kicked in and she corrected, steering into the slide, feeling the tires catch and grip and launch her forward again. Behind her, the SUVs were falling back. They were fast, but they were heavy and careful. Alara was neither. She hit Lakeshore Drive doing 90, weaving through late-night traffic like she was threading a needle. Horns blared. Someone screamed. She didn't slow down. The charger felt alive beneath her, responding to every touch like they were connected. This was what she'd been missing. This was who she was. Not Adrian's silent statue, the screaming, reckless woman who drove like she was trying to outrun death itself. She lost the security team somewhere near Montrose, then kept driving just to be sure. North through Rogers Park, then west into Evanston, then south again in a pattern designed to confuse anyone trying to track her. By the time she finally pulled off into an empty parking lot behind a closed warehouse, her entire body was vibrating with adrenaline. She turned off the engine and sat in the sudden silence, her hands still gripping the wheel, her heart still racing. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. She'd stolen Adrian Moreau's car, his files, and his perfectly controlled life. She'd broken every rule he'd set for her and burned their arrangement to the ground, and she'd never felt more alive. Alara rested her forehead against the steering wheel and laughed until tears ran down her face, the kind of laughter that lives right next to screaming, wild and broken and free. Then she wiped her eyes, restarted the engine, and drove toward the only place she could think to go, the industrial district where Chicago's underground racing circuit operated in the shadows. If she was going to disappear, she was going to disappear into something she actually understood. Adrian wanted a statue? Fine. The statue was dead. Now he'd have to deal with the ghost. The warehouse district looked exactly like Alara remembered. Industrial skeletons against the night sky, broken streetlights, and the distant rumble of engines that meant people were gathered somewhere close. She followed the sound through empty streets until she found them. A crowd clustered in an abandoned lot between two derelict buildings, their faces lit by phone screens and the glow of headlights. This was the circuit. Chicago's underground racing scene, where money changed hands in cash and reputations were built on quarter-mile sprints through streets the cops had given up patrolling. Alara had dominated this world once, back when she'd been young and fearless and convinced she was immortal. Now she was just desperate. She parked the Charger at the edge of the lot and killed the engine. Through the windshield, she could see maybe 40 people milling around. Drivers, mechanics, spectators, the usual mix of adrenaline junkies and criminals looking for entertainment. Several cars sat ready to race, a modified Nissan GTR, a Subaru WRX with an aftermarket exhaust that probably violated 6 noise ordinances, and a BMW M3 that looked fast enough to be dangerous. Alara climbed out of the Charger and immediately felt eyes turn toward her. She was still wearing the emerald silk dress from the gala, now torn at the hem and stained with grease from the garage floor. Her feet were bare because she'd ditched the heels somewhere around Evanston. She looked like she'd escaped from a wedding and lost a fight with reality on the way. "Holy shit," someone said. "That's a Charger RT." The crowd's attention shifted from her to the car, which was fine with Alara. Let them look at the machine instead of the mess driving it. A man in his 30s with tattooed forearms and a leather jacket approached, his eyes locked on the Charger with the kind of hunger mechanics get around rare vehicles. "That original engine?" "Rebuilt," Alara said. 425 horsepower, bored 30 over, upgraded cam, new headers. His eyebrows went up. "You do the work?" "Most of it." "Bullshit." He walked around the car, inspecting it like he was looking for proof she was lying. "This is professional-grade restoration." "I used to be a professional." Alara leaned against the hood, trying to look more confident than she felt. "I'm here to race." The man laughed. "In a dress? You got a problem with my outfit?" "I got a problem with tourists showing up thinking they can hang because they watched Fast and Furious." He jerked his chin toward the other cars. "This isn't a game. People get hurt." "I know what this is. I used to run this circuit 3 years ago." "Yeah? What name?" "Vance. Alara Vance." Recognition flickered across his face, followed by skepticism. "Bullshit. Vance disappeared. Word was she either died or got married to some rich asshole and went soft." "Both, technically." Alara pushed off the hood. "But I'm back. So either let me race or get out of my way." He studied her for a long moment, trying to decide if she was serious or crazy. "Probably both." "Entry fee is 500 cash, he said finally. "Winner takes 60% of the pot, second place gets 30, third gets 10. You wreck, you're responsible for damages. Cops show up, you're on your own. And if you're still driving around in that pretty dress when this is over, don't come crying when you can't handle the heat." Alara didn't have $500. She barely had $5. But she did have diamond earrings that Adrian had given her, each one probably worth more than every car in this lot combined. She pulled them off and dropped them into the man's palm. "That cover it?" He stared at the diamonds, then at her face. "Where the hell did you get these?" "Does it matter?" "It does if they're stolen." "They're mine. Paid for with 3 years of my life, so yeah, they're definitely mine." He closed his fist around the earrings. "You're either the real deal or the craziest person I've met this week. Either way, you're in." "Name for the board?" Alara hesitated. Using her real name was stupid. If word got back to Adrian that Alara Vance was racing again, he'd know exactly where to find her. She needed something else. Something that fit who she was now instead of who she'd been. "Nyx," she said. In Greek mythology, Nyx was the goddess of night, powerful, mysterious, feared even by Zeus. It felt right. "Nyx." The man wrote it down on a clipboard. "You're in Heat 3, about 20 minutes. Don't be late." He walked away, already barking orders at someone else. Alara stood alone next to the Charger, her heart hammering against her ribs. Around her, the crowd buzzed with energy and speculation. She caught fragments of conversation, people betting, arguing about modifications, talking shit about other drivers' skills. This was real. She was actually doing this. A woman in ripped jeans and a tank top that showed off elaborate sleeve tattoos wandered over, looking Alara up and down with undisguised curiosity. "You're the one who showed up in the evening gown." "It's not an evening gown, it's a cocktail dress." "My mistake. Very important distinction." The woman grinned. "I'm Raina. I run a crew out of Pilsen. You really used to race here? Yeah. Prove it. What was the rule about running Roosevelt after midnight? It was a test. Roosevelt Road had been notorious in the circuit 3 years ago because of unpredictable police patrols. Never run it eastbound after midnight on weekends because 3rd District does sweeps. Westbound was clear until 2 a.m. Raina's grin widened. Okay, so you're not completely full of shit. What happened to you? You just vanished. Got trapped in a bad situation. Now I'm untrapped. That why you look like you escaped from a crime scene? Ilara glanced down at her ruined dress. Long story. They usually are. Raina pulled a cigarette from her pocket and lit it, the flame briefly illuminating her face. She was probably around Ilara's age, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that missed nothing. Word of advice: people here have long memories. You show up claiming to be Vance, you better drive like her, otherwise they'll eat you alive. I can handle it. Can you? Because no offense, but you look like you've been through hell, and you're about 2 steps from falling apart. She wasn't wrong. Ilara's hands were shaking, her feet hurt from walking barefoot on concrete, and somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice kept screaming that Adrian was going to find her, and this was all going to end badly. But that voice had been screaming for 3 years, and she was tired of listening to it. I'll be fine, Ilara said. Raina shrugged. Your funeral. But if you survive and need a place to crash, my crew's got space. We don't ask questions. Why would you help me? Because anyone desperate enough to show up here in diamonds and silk is either running from something big or running towards something bigger. She blew smoke into the night air. And I respect that. Before Ilara could respond, someone shouted that Heat 3 was starting. Her pulse kicked up. She nodded at Raina and headed back to the charger. 3 other cars pulled up to the starting line. The Nissan GTR she'd noticed earlier, a Honda Civic that looked deceptively plain but probably had 50 grand in modifications under the hood, and a Mustang GT with racing stripes and an ego problem. Ilara positioned the Charger at the far right, her hands finding their familiar places on the steering wheel. The engine rumbled beneath her, patient and ready. Around them, the crowd pressed close, phones out, recording, betting, hungry for the spectacle. The man with the tattooed forearms, apparently the unofficial race organizer, stood in front of the 4 cars with a flashlight. Rules are simple. 2 miles through the warehouse district, loop back here. First one across the finish line wins. You crash? That's your problem. You cheat? We ban you. Questions? Nobody had questions. Racers ready? Ilara's breath came faster. Her vision sharpened. This was it. The moment that would prove whether the past 3 years had destroyed her or just buried her. The organizer raised the flashlight. On my mark, 3. The Civic's engine revved aggressively. 2. Ilara's foot hovered over the accelerator, every muscle coiled. 1. Go! She punched the gas. The Charger exploded forward, tires screaming against asphalt, the world compressing into a narrow tunnel of speed and sound. The other cars launched alongside her. The GTR got off the line fastest, its all-wheel drive giving it better traction. The Civic was right behind. The Mustang hung back slightly. They hit the first turn together, 4 cars trying to fit through a gap meant for 2. Ilara braked late and hard, feeling the Charger's weight shift as she threw it into the corner. The GTR had the inside line. The Civic tried to force its way through on the outside and nearly clipped the Mustang. Ilara saw her opening, a narrow space between the GTR and the warehouse wall. Dangerous, stupid, exactly the kind of move that had made her reputation 3 years ago. She aimed for it. The Charger squeezed through with inches to spare, so close to the wall that sparks flew from her side mirror scraping brick. She heard the crowd roar behind them, distant and unreal. They hit a straightaway. The GTR pulled ahead, its superior horsepower showing. But Ilara knew these streets. She'd raced them 100 times. Up ahead was a sharp right that most drivers took too conservatively, losing speed and momentum. She waited until the last possible second, then downshifted and cranked the wheel hard. The Charger slid sideways, tires smoking, the tail end swinging out in a controlled drift. She could feel the car dancing on the edge of traction, threatening to spin completely. Then she corrected, straightened out, and punched the accelerator again. The drift had cost her speed, but given her the perfect angle for the next turn. She shot forward while the GTR had to brake and reposition. By the time they hit the second straightaway, Alara was in first place. The Civic tried to pass on her left. She blocked it. The Mustang made a move on her right. She cut it off. Behind her, the GTR was gaining ground again, its driver clearly pissed off and determined to reclaim the lead. Half a mile left. Alara's hands ached from gripping the wheel. Her heart was trying to beat its way out of her chest. The Charger's engine was screaming, pushed harder than it had been in years. The GTR pulled alongside her, its driver, a kid who couldn't be more than 20, glaring at her through his window. They were neck and neck, trading paint, neither willing to give an inch. The final turn approached, a hairpin that led back to the lot where the crowd waited. Whoever took it better would win. The GTR's driver made his move first, trying to take the inside line. But Alara had spent 3 years thinking about these streets, remembering every race she'd ever run. She knew something he didn't. That turn had a pothole on the inside that would destroy your suspension if you hit it wrong. She let him take the inside line, watched him commit, then saw his expression change as his car bounced violently over the pothole, his front end dipping, his speed dropping. Alara took the outside line smooth and fast, her angle perfect, and shot past him like he was standing still. She crossed the finish line 3 car lengths ahead. The crowd erupted. She kept driving for another 100 feet before finally hitting the brakes, her whole body shaking with adrenaline and relief and something that felt dangerously close to joy. She'd won. She'd actually won. By the time she turned the Charger around and drove back to the lot, people were already surrounding her car. The organizer was grinning, counting cash. Raina was laughing and shaking her head. Even the GTR driver had climbed out of his car and was walking over, looking more impressed than angry. Alara killed the engine and sat there for a moment, her hands still gripping the wheel, trying to process what she'd just done. Then she opened the door and stepped out into a wall of noise. That drift at the warehouse corner was insane. Where'd you learn to drive like that? Who the hell are you? Alara didn't answer. She just pushed through the crowd until she found the organizer. He handed her a stack of cash, $800, her winnings from the pot. Not bad for someone in a cocktail dress, he said. You racing again? Yeah. Good. People are going to want rematches. That kid in the GTR is already talking shit about how he'll smoke you next time. He paused. You need anything? Place to stay? Crew parts? I'm fine. You don't look fine. You look like you're about to collapse. He wasn't wrong. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her exhausted and shaky. But admitting weakness felt dangerous, like it would give someone an opening to hurt her. I said I'm fine. The organizer shrugged. Suit yourself. Next race is Friday. You want in? I want in everything, every race, every night, anything you've got. His eyebrows went up. You're serious. Dead serious. All right, I'll add you to the list. He looked at her more carefully. You running from something? Isn't everyone here? Yeah, but most people aren't running this hard. He lowered his voice. Look, I don't know what your situation is, and I'm not asking. But word's going to spread about tonight, about Nix and the Black Charger. People are going to start paying attention. If someone's looking for you, they'll hear about it eventually. Alara had already considered that. Adrian had connections everywhere. Cops, informants, people who traded information for money. It was only a matter of time before someone reported back to him that his stolen car had been spotted at an illegal race. But she couldn't think about that right now. If she started thinking about all the ways this could go wrong, she'd lose her nerve completely. Let them look, she said. After the organizer walked away, Alara leaned against the Charger and tried to figure out her next move. She had $800 and a stolen car. She needed a place to hide, new clothes, and probably a different vehicle eventually because the Charger was too recognizable. Told you my crew had space if you needed it. Alara turned to find Raina standing there, arms crossed, expression knowing. I don't need charity. It's not charity. It's business. You can drive, which means you're useful. We've got a safe house in Bridgeport. Nothing fancy, but it's off the grid. You crash there, you help with jobs, everybody benefits. Raina tilted her head. Or you can keep being stubborn and sleep in your car until whoever you're running from catches up. Alara wanted to refuse. Accepting help meant owing someone, and owing someone meant vulnerability. But she was also exhausted and realistic enough to know she couldn't do this alone. What kind of jobs? Delivery runs mostly. Sometimes we move merchandise for people who don't want cops involved. Sometimes we do transport for high rollers who need discretion. Nothing that'll get you killed if you're smart about it. And if I'm not smart about it, Raina grinned, then I guess you won't last long. It was a terrible idea. Alara knew it was a terrible idea. But all her good ideas had led to 3 years of being Adrian Moreau's decorative prisoner, so maybe it was time to try terrible ones. One condition, Ilara said. Nobody asks about my past. I don't care about yours. You don't care about mine. Deal. They shook on it, Raina's grip strong and calloused. Then Raina jerked her head toward a modified Toyota Supra parked nearby. Follow me, and try not to get pulled over. The Charger's got stolen written all over it. It's not stolen, it's mine. Whatever helps you sleep at night. The safe house turned out to be an old mechanic's shop in Bridgeport that had been converted into living quarters. The garage bay still had lifts and tools, but the back office had been turned into a makeshift apartment with mattresses on the floor, a mini fridge, and a TV that only got 3 channels. 2 other people were there when they arrived. A lean guy in his 20s with nervous energy and quick hands who Raina introduced as Spider, and a woman about Raina's age with bleached blonde hair and a face that suggested she'd seen some shit. Her name was Kelsey. This is Nix, Raina told them. She's crashing here. She can drive and she's got her own car, so she's useful. Spider looked at Alara with the kind of suspicion people develop from being betrayed too many times. Where'd she come from? Somewhere else. That's all you need to know. She looks like a cop. I'm not a cop, Alara said tiredly. That's exactly what a cop would say. Kelsey, who'd been smoking by the window, spoke up. Cops don't usually show up in ripped designer dresses looking like they just escaped a hostage situation. She's fine. She stubbed out her cigarette. There's a shower in the back if you want to clean up. Water pressure's shit, but it's hot. Elora had never wanted anything more. She nodded her thanks and headed toward the bathroom, feeling Spider's suspicious eyes following her the whole way. The shower was exactly as advertised. Terrible pressure, rust stains, but blessedly hot. Alara stood under the spray until her skin turned red and her fingers pruned, washing away makeup and fear and the last remnants of Mrs. Adrian Moreau. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel someone had left on a hook, she found a pile of clothes outside the door, worn jeans, a black t-shirt, and a hoodie. They fit well enough. Everything was slightly big, but that was better than the alternative. When she returned to the main room, Kelsey handed her a beer. You eat today? Alara tried to remember. No. Thought so. You look half dead. Kelsey pulled a pizza box from the mini fridge and shoved it toward her. It's cold, but it's edible. Probably. The pizza was definitely cold and only marginally edible, but Alara ate 3 slices anyway while the others watched TV and occasionally glanced at her like they were trying to figure out if she was a threat or an asset. So, Spider said eventually, his suspicion apparently not satisfied. What's your story? And don't tell me you don't have one because nobody shows up here without baggage. Spider, Raina warned. What? I'm just asking what we're all thinking. She drives like a professional. She's wearing someone's diamonds as entry fees. And she looks like she's been through a war. I want to know what we're getting into. Alara set down her pizza. You want the truth? Fine. I was married to someone dangerous. I left. Now I'm here. That's the whole story. Does someone dangerous have a name? No. Is he going to show up here looking for you? Probably. Eventually. Spider stood up fast. Oh, hell no. We're not getting involved in domestic drama. If some pissed-off husband comes rolling through here, he's not a husband, not anymore. Alara's voice was flat. And if he shows up, I'll handle it. You won't be involved. How are we not involved? You're staying in our safe house. Spider, sit down, Raina said. She was watching Alara closely, her expression thoughtful. The dangerous someone. Is he connected? Alara hesitated. Lying felt wrong after they'd given her shelter, but telling the truth felt dangerous. Finally, she just said, yes. How connected? Very. Raina and Kelsey exchanged a look. Some wordless communication passed between them. That's a problem, Kelsey said carefully. I know. Does he know where you are? Not yet, but he's looking. And when he finds you? I don't know. Alara met Kelsey's eyes. I just know I can't go back. I'd rather die first. The room went quiet. Even Spider had stopped protesting, watching her with something that might have been sympathy. "All right," Raina said finally. "Here's the deal. You can stay as long as you pull your weight, and don't bring heat down on us. You race, you drive for jobs, you help with maintenance. And if your past catches up and things get ugly, you handle it yourself or you leave. We don't get involved in wars we didn't start. That's fair." "Good." Raina cracked her own beer. "Now let's talk business. There's another race Wednesday. Bigger pot, better drivers. You interested?" "Yes." "There's also a transport job Thursday. Some tech executive needs discreet pickup from O'Hare and a ride to a meeting in Naperville. Pays $1,500 if you don't ask questions." "I'll do it." Spider made a disgusted noise. "You're just going to trust her with jobs? We don't even know her real name." "Her real name doesn't matter." Raina looked at Alara. "What matters is whether she can drive and keep her mouth shut. Can you?" "Yes." "Then we're good." Raina raised her beer. "Welcome to the crew, Nix. Try not to get us all killed." They drank to that, a strange, fractured toast among people who barely knew each other but understood the value of not asking too many questions. Later, lying on a mattress in the corner while the others slept, Alara stared at the ceiling and tried to convince herself she'd made the right choice. She'd gone from one dangerous situation to another, from Adrian's controlled empire to the chaos of the underground circuit. But at least here, she was choosing her own risks. Her phone was gone, thrown away hours ago, which meant she had no way of knowing if Adrian was looking for her or what he was planning. The not knowing should have terrified her. Instead, it felt almost liberating. She'd spent 3 years anticipating his moods, reading his expressions, trying to predict his reactions so she could stay safe and small and manageable. Now she didn't have to predict anything. She could just exist moment to moment, making her own choices even if they were terrible ones. Her last thought before sleep took her was that the Alara who'd married Adrian Moreau would have been horrified by all of this. That woman had been careful and responsible and convinced that playing by the rules would keep her safe. This version of herself didn't care about safety. She just cared about survival. And maybe, eventually, about revenge. 3 weeks passed in a blur of races, transport jobs, and sleepless nights. Alara, Nix, she had to keep reminding herself, fell into a rhythm with Raina's crew that felt both foreign and familiar. Days were spent maintaining the Charger or helping Spider work on the other vehicles they kept in rotation. Nights belonged to the circuit, where she raced anyone willing to put money down and built a reputation that spread through Chicago's underground like wildfire. The Ghost Driver, some people started calling her. The woman in the black Charger who showed up, won, and disappeared before anyone could get close. She wore a helmet during races now, kept conversations short, and never stayed at the after-parties where drivers got drunk and stupid and talked too much. Mystery bred speculation, and speculation bred fear, and fear meant people took her seriously. It also meant the money was getting better. She'd won almost $6,000 in the past 3 weeks, enough to start thinking about what came next. But thinking about the future required acknowledging she had one, and Alara wasn't ready to make that assumption yet. Every morning she woke up expecting Adrian's security team to kick down the door. Every time a black SUV passed on the street, her heart seized. But days turned into weeks, and nothing happened. Either Marco had kept his word and never reported seeing her, or Adrian was playing a longer game than she'd anticipated. She'd stopped trying to guess which. It was Thursday afternoon when things started to unravel. Alara was under the Charger changing the oil, something she did weekly now because she was pushing the engine harder than it was meant to handle, when Kelsey's phone rang in the office. Through the open door, Alara heard her answer. "Yeah, this is Kelsey." A pause. "Hold on, let me ask." She stuck her head out. "Nix, you available for a job tonight?" Alara rolled out from under the car, wiping her hands on a rag. "What kind?" "High-end transport. Client needs pickup from a private event downtown. Discreet route to a hotel in Oakbrook. $2,000 for 3 hours of work." $2,000 for a glorified taxi service meant the client was either paranoid, illegal, or both. But Alara had stopped asking questions about that kind of thing. The circuit operated on a simple principle. You did the work, you got paid, you didn't talk about it afterward. "I'm in." "Good. Client wants the Charger specifically. Apparently word's gotten around about the Ghost Driver with the muscle car." Kelsey grinned. "You're becoming famous." Famous was the last thing Alara wanted, but she needed the money more than she needed anonymity. What time? Pick up at 11? I'll text you the address. The rest of the afternoon passed in preparation. Alara cleaned the Charger inside and out, checked the tire pressure, topped off all the fluids. When evening came, she showered and changed into the closest thing she had to professional clothes. Dark jeans, a black jacket, boots that didn't have oil stains. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror above the sink and barely recognized the woman staring back. Her face was thinner than it had been 3 weeks ago. She'd lost weight from barely eating, surviving on pizza and energy drinks and adrenaline. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but there was something different too, something harder. She didn't look like Adrian's perfect wife anymore. She looked dangerous. Good. Raina found her in the garage around 10:30, doing a final check on the Charger's engine. You nervous? Should I be? These high-end jobs can get weird. Rich people have strange requests. Raina leaned against the workbench. But you'll be fine. Just remember, you're a driver, not a therapist. You don't need to make conversation. You don't need to be their friend. You just need to get them from point A to point B without anyone noticing. Got it. And Nix? Raina's expression turned serious. If something feels wrong, you bail. No amount of money is worth getting caught up in someone else's mess. Alara nodded, though she had no intention of bailing. She needed this money, needed the work, needed to keep moving because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering how badly she'd destroyed her life. The address Kelsey had texted turned out to be a private club in the Loop, the kind of place that didn't have signs or advertised hours. Alara pulled up at exactly 11 and waited, engine idling, watching the door. At 11:07, a man emerged. Mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of nervous energy that suggested he was used to getting what he wanted and anxious when he didn't. He looked around quickly before approaching the Charger. Alara rolled down the window. You call for transport? You're Nix? That's me. He studied her face like he was trying to memorize it, then seemed satisfied with whatever he saw. Oakbrook, the Marriott. Take side streets, no highways. And if anyone follows us, you lose them. Understood? Understood. He climbed into the back seat and Alara caught a glimpse of his face in the rearview mirror. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool November air. Whatever he was running from, it had him genuinely scared. She pulled away from the curb and headed west, taking Roosevelt like she'd been instructed. The man didn't speak. He just watched out the back window, his leg bouncing nervously. They were 10 minutes into the drive when Alara noticed the sedan 3 cars back. Dark blue, tinted windows, driving just a little too carefully. Could have been coincidence. Could have been paranoia. But Alara had spent 3 weeks learning to trust her instincts again, and her instincts were screaming. We've got a tail, she said quietly. The man's head snapped around. What? Where? 3 cars back, blue sedan, could be nothing. It's not nothing, lose them. Alara's pulse kicked up. Hold on! She took the next right turn without signaling, cutting through a residential area. The sedan followed. She accelerated through a yellow light, then took a sharp left into an alley. The Charger barely fit between the buildings, her mirrors scraping brick on both sides. Behind them, the sedan tried to follow and got stuck, its wider frame unable to navigate the narrow passage. Alara burst out the other end of the alley, took 2 more quick turns, then merged into traffic heading south. She drove for 5 minutes in silence, constantly checking her mirrors. The sedan didn't reappear. We're clear, she said finally. The man exhaled shakily. You're good at this. I've had practice. What's your name? Your real name? You're paying for a driver, not a friend. My real name doesn't matter. He laughed, but it sounded strained. Fair enough. He was quiet for a moment, then said, You ever drive for anyone important? Define important. Connected, powerful. The kind of people who make problems disappear. Alara's hands tightened on the wheel. Why are you asking? Because I need a driver I can trust, someone who knows how to stay invisible. He leaned forward. I'll pay triple your normal rate, weekly work, no questions asked. It was a terrible idea. Alara knew it was a terrible idea. Getting tied to one client meant visibility, meant patterns, meant giving someone leverage over her. But it also meant steady money, and steady money meant options. I'll think about it, she said. They finished the drive in silence. When they reached the Oak Brook Marriott, the man handed her an envelope through the window. "That's $2,000 plus a tip. You earned it." He pulled out a business card. "You change your mind about weekly work. Call this number." Alara took the card but didn't look at it. "Thanks. Be careful out there. Chicago's more dangerous than it used to be." He disappeared into the hotel before she could respond. Alara sat in the parking lot for a long moment, staring at the business card. No name, just a phone number. She should have thrown it away. Instead, she tucked it into her jacket pocket and drove back to Bridgeport. The safe house was dark when she arrived. Spider and Kelsey were out on their own jobs, and Raina had mentioned something about meeting a parts supplier. Alara parked the Charger, counted the money in the envelope, $2,500, which meant the tip had been generous, and headed inside. She was halfway through making instant coffee when her instinct screamed again. Something was wrong. The air felt different, heavier, and there was a smell she didn't recognize. Cologne, expensive, familiar in a way that made her stomach drop. She turned slowly and found Adrian Moreau sitting in the shadows by the window. For a moment, Alara couldn't breathe. Her brain refused to process what she was seeing. Adrian wasn't supposed to be here. This was her space, her life, her carefully constructed escape. He didn't belong in it. But there he sat, perfectly composed in his dark suit, one leg crossed over the other, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "Hello, Alara." Her hand moved instinctively toward the wrench she'd left on the workbench. Adrian noticed and smiled. "Don't. I'm not here to hurt you." "Then why are you here?" "To talk, that's all." He gestured at the chair across from him. "Sit down." "I'd rather stand." "Fine. Stand." His eyes traveled over her, the oil-stained jeans, the worn jacket, the messy hair she hadn't bothered styling in weeks. "You look different." "You look the same." "I'll take that as a compliment." He uncrossed his legs and leaned forward slightly. "You've been busy. 3 weeks of racing, multiple transport jobs, building quite the reputation as this mysterious Nix character. Impressive." Alara's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "How long have you known?" "Since the second race. One of my associates has a cousin who runs in the circuit. He recognized my Charger and put 2 and 2 together." Adrian's smile was cold. "I've been watching you ever since." "Why didn't you stop me?" "Because I wanted to see what you'd do. And honestly, Alara, I'm fascinated." He stood, moving closer. 3 years I spent trying to figure you out. 3 years of you playing the perfect, obedient wife. And the whole time this was underneath. A street racer, a driver, someone actually interesting. I was always interesting. You just never bothered to look. You're right, I didn't. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could see his expression clearly. And what she saw there shocked her. Not anger, but something that looked almost like regret. "That was my mistake." "Your mistake was treating me like property." "I know." The admission caught her off guard. Adrian never admitted mistakes, never showed vulnerability. It was a trap. Had to be a trap. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want you to come back." Alara laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. "Are you insane? I'm never coming back." "Hear me out, please. Why should I? Because in 3 weeks you've done more impressive work than half my organization manages in a year. You've built a reputation from nothing, created a new identity, found a crew that's loyal to you. You did all of that while having no resources and every reason to fall apart." He paused. "That's not the woman I married. That's someone I never knew existed." "Because you never let her exist." "I know." Adrian ran a hand through his hair, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked genuinely unsettled. "I thought I wanted someone I could control. Someone safe and decorative who wouldn't challenge me. And I got exactly that. A beautiful statue who hated me more every day. You're right. I did hate you." "Past tense?" "I don't feel anything about you anymore. You're just someone I used to know." That seemed to hurt him more than hatred would have. His jaw tightened. "I don't believe that." "Believe what you want. It won't change anything." Adrian was quiet for a moment, studying her face like he was seeing her for the first time. "What if I offered you a real partnership? Not marriage, not ownership, an actual alliance where you have power and autonomy. Why would you do that?" Because watching you operate these past 3 weeks showed me what I should have seen from the beginning. You're not just skilled, you're strategic. You know how to read situations, adapt, survive. Those are valuable traits in my world. He took a breath. And because I'm tired of surrounding myself with people who only tell me what I want to hear, you never did that. Even when you were pretending to be manageable, there was always something underneath, something I couldn't quite touch. Alara wanted to tell him to go to hell, wanted to grab the wrench and make him leave. But part of her, the part that was exhausted and scared and tired of running, hesitated. What kind of partnership? You'd oversee transport operations, legitimate and otherwise. You'd have your own crew, your own budget, your own authority. No one gives you orders except me, and even then, you'd have the right to push back. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. I brought a contract, real legal protections, not the bullshit agreement we had before. And if I say no, then I walk away. I don't chase you, don't threaten your brother, don't interfere with your life. You stay here, keep racing, keep doing transport jobs for people who will pay you a fraction of what you're worth. His expression hardened slightly. But you should know that the flash drive you stole from my office, the one you probably think is insurance, it's encrypted. You can't access it without my codes. So whatever leverage you thought you had doesn't exist. Alara had forgotten about the flash drive, tucked away in the charger's glove box. She'd been too busy surviving to think about using it. This feels like a trap. It's not. It's an opportunity. Adrian set the envelope on the workbench between them. Read the contract. Think about it. If you want to accept, meet me at the Drake tomorrow night at 8. If you don't show, I'll know your answer and you'll never see me again. He turned toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Alara, I'm sorry. For all of it. You deserve better than what I gave you. Then he was gone, disappearing into the November darkness like he'd never been there at all. Alara stood frozen in the empty safe house, her mind racing. She looked at the envelope on the workbench like it was a bomb waiting to explode. This was impossible. Adrian didn't apologize, didn't offer partnerships, didn't admit mistakes. Everything about this felt wrong. But she picked up the envelope anyway and pulled out the contract. It was real. 30 pages of legal language, but the core terms were clear. She'd have autonomous control over transportation operations, a salary that made her racing winnings look like pocket change, and explicit protections against being treated as property. There were clauses about decision-making authority, dispute resolution, and termination conditions that would give her clean exit options. It looked legitimate, too legitimate. Alara was still reading when Raina returned an hour later and found her sitting on the floor surrounded by papers. What's all this? A job offer from my past. Raina knelt down, scanning the contract. Her eyebrows went up. This is a lot of zeros. Who's offering? The dangerous someone I was married to. Jesus. Raina sat back. This is real? Apparently. What are you going to do? That was the question. Alara had spent 3 weeks building a new life from nothing, proving she could survive without Adrian's resources. She'd reclaimed pieces of herself she'd thought were lost forever. Going back felt like surrender, but staying here meant constant struggle, always looking over her shoulder, never having real security. And the contract offered something she'd never had with Adrian before, actual power. I don't know, Alara said honestly. The smart move is probably to tell him to go to hell. But I'm tired, Raina. I'm tired of running and hiding and scraping by, and part of me wants to walk back into his world and prove I'm better at it than anyone thought possible. Raina was quiet for a moment. You know, if you take this, we lose you. Can't have you here if you're working for someone that connected. Too much risk for everyone. I know. But I also get it. Sometimes the best revenge isn't running away. It's going back and taking everything they tried to keep from you. She picked up one of the contract pages. This protection clause is solid. If he violates it, you could destroy him legally. You think I should do it? I think you should do whatever lets you sleep at night. But yeah, if I were you, I'd walk into that meeting tomorrow and negotiate for even more. Make him understand exactly what it'll cost to have you back. Alara spent the rest of the night reading the contract repeatedly, looking for traps and loopholes. By sunrise, she'd made her decision. She was going to the meeting, not because she wanted Adrian back, but because she wanted to see his face when she told him her terms. Friday evening, Alara stood outside the Drake Hotel wearing the only decent clothes she still owned: dark pants, a fitted jacket, boots. She'd left the helmet and the Knicks persona back in Bridgeport. Tonight, she was just Alara Vance, deciding whether to reclaim her married name or leave it in the past where it belonged. Adrian was waiting in a private dining room on the top floor, the same place he'd taken her on their first anniversary. The memory should have bothered her. Instead, she felt nothing. He stood when she entered, his expression carefully neutral. "You came. I came to negotiate, not to accept." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Fair enough. Sit." They sat across from each other like opposing generals negotiating a truce. A server brought wine that Alara didn't touch. "I read the contract," she said. "It's better than I expected, but not good enough." "What do you want changed?" "Everything. If I'm coming back, it's not as your employee. It's as your equal partner. 50-50 split on all profits from operations I oversee. Full decision-making authority with no veto power from you. And my name on the legal documentation for every business we run together." Adrian's eyebrows rose. "That's not a partnership. That's a takeover. Call it what you want. Those are my terms." "Why would I agree to that?" "Because you said it yourself. I'm valuable. And you're smart enough to know that the only way to keep me is to give me real power. Anything less, and I walk." She leaned forward. "You thought you wanted someone manageable, Adrian. But manageable people don't build empires. They just maintain them. If you want someone who can actually grow what you've created, you need someone who'll challenge you." He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "You've changed." "No, I just stopped hiding who I was." "When did you become so ruthless?" "About 3 years ago. You just never noticed." Adrian laughed, and it sounded genuine. "You're going to be a nightmare to work with." "Probably. Do we have a deal or not?" He picked up his wine glass, considering. Then he raised it slightly. "We have a deal. Equal partners, full authority, your name on everything. I'll have my lawyers redraft the contract." Alara should have felt victorious. Instead, she just felt tired. "One more thing. Danny's debt is officially cleared. Permanently. No matter what happens between us, you don't touch my family. Done. And I keep the charger. It's mine. It always was." Adrian's expression softened slightly. "For what it's worth, I meant what I said last night. I'm sorry. I didn't understand what I had until I watched you become someone I'd actually want as a partner. Save the sentiments. This is business, not reconciliation." "Understood." They spent the next 2 hours hammering out details: which operations she'd control, how profits would be split, what authority structures would look like. It was exhausting and exhilarating, and by the time they finished, Alara realized she'd been arguing with Adrian like an equal for the first time in their entire relationship. This was what she'd needed all along. Not his money or protection, but his respect. As they left the restaurant, Adrian paused. "There's something you should know. Vincent Chen has been skimming from our shipping operations for 6 months. I have proof, but I haven't moved on it yet because I wanted to see how deep it goes." "Why are you telling me?" "Because as of Monday, shipping is your responsibility. And because Vincent's connected to some dangerous people, handling this wrong could start a war." Alara felt a chill run down her spine. This was a test. Adrian was seeing if she could handle real pressure, real danger. "I'll handle it," she said. "I know you will. That's why I hired you." They parted ways in the lobby. Alara walked back to her car, the Charger, her Charger, and sat behind the wheel for a long time before starting the engine. She'd just agreed to walk back into Adrian's world, not as his wife, not as his possession, but as his partner. It should have felt like defeat. Instead, it felt like the beginning of something else entirely, something that might actually be hers. She drove back to Bridgeport to pack her things and say goodbye to Raina's crew. Monday, she'd start her new position. And she'd prove to Adrian and everyone else that the woman they'd dismissed as a decorative statue was actually the most dangerous piece on the board. Monday morning arrived with freezing rain and the kind of gray sky that made Chicago feel like it was trying to drown itself. Alara stood outside Adrian's downtown office building, staring up at 40 floors of steel and glass, and wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. She'd spent the weekend moving her few belongings out of the Bridgeport safe house and into a downtown apartment Adrian had arranged. It was nice. Too nice. The kind of place with marble countertops and floor-to-ceiling windows that made her feel exposed. But it was hers. Or at least the lease was in her name, which was more than she'd had a month ago. Raina had helped her move, not saying much but making her disapproval clear through pointed silence. Spider had refused to even look at her. Only Kelsey had offered any words of support. "Don't let him reshape you again," she'd said, handing Alara a box of tools. "You went back for power. Make sure you actually take it." Now, standing in the rain outside Adrian's empire, Alara hoped she could live up to that advice. She walked through the lobby like she owned the place, which technically she partially did now. The security guard at the desk looked up, started to ask her to sign in, then recognized her and went pale. "Mrs. Moreau, sorry, I didn't know you were—" "It's fine." Alara didn't correct the name. Let them think what they wanted. "I'm here to see Adrian." "Of course, top floor. He's expecting you." The elevator ride felt like it took hours. When the doors finally opened, she found herself in a reception area that screamed money and power. Marble floors, original artwork on the walls, a receptionist who looked like she'd been hired based on her ability to intimidate people with a single glance. "Ms. Vance," the receptionist said, proving she'd been briefed. "Mr. Moreau is in the conference room. Second door on your left." Alara found Adrian standing at a floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the city. He turned when she entered, and for a moment they just studied each other. He looked tired, she realized, like the past month had cost him more than he wanted to admit. "You're early," he said. "I don't believe in being late." "Good trait for this line of work." He gestured toward the conference table where several folders sat waiting. "I pulled together everything you'll need. Financial records for our shipping operations, employee files, supply chain documentation. Vincent Chen's file is on top." Alara picked it up and started reading. Vincent had been with Adrian for 7 years, working his way up from a low-level logistics coordinator to head of international shipping. The numbers in his file showed consistent performance until 6 months ago, when small discrepancies started appearing. Missing shipments, unexplained delays, inventory that didn't match manifests. How much has he stolen? Best estimate? 300,000 over 6 months. Alara whistled. "That's not skimming, that's a side business." "Exactly, which means he's either stupid or he has protection from someone who thinks they're bigger than me." Adrian sat down across from her. "Your first job is to figure out which and handle it accordingly." You want me to kill him?" "I want you to solve the problem. How you do that is up to you." He paused. "But understand something, Alara. Vincent has connections to the Kozlov organization. Russian mob, very territorial, very violent. If you go after him directly, they might take it as a declaration of war. So I need to be smart about it. You need to be surgical. Cut out the infection without damaging surrounding tissue." Alara spent the next hour reviewing files while Adrian made phone calls in his office. The picture that emerged was worse than simple theft. Vincent had been rerouting shipments through dummy companies, skimming product, and reselling it through his own network. But the really interesting part was the timing. The theft had started exactly when a new player entered Chicago's shipping market, a company called Volkov Transport, owned by Dmitry Kozlov's nephew. "He's not working alone," Alara said when Adrian returned. "He's partnering with the Kozlovs. They're using our infrastructure to move their product, and Vincent's getting a cut." Adrian's expression darkened. "You're sure?" "The timing's too perfect to be coincidence. And look at these routes." She spread several manifests across the table. "Vincent's been redirecting our trucks through Northside warehouses we don't own. 3 of them are registered to Volkov Transport." "Son of a bitch." Adrian rubbed his face. "This is worse than I thought. If Vincent's in bed with the Kozlovs, we can't just eliminate him. They'll retaliate. So we make them want to eliminate him instead." Adrian looked at her sharply. "Explain." "Vincent's stealing from us, but he's also stealing from them. He has to be. That's how guys like this operate. They can't help themselves." Alara pulled up financial records on her laptop. "If I can prove he's been skimming from the Kozlovs too, they'll handle the problem for us. We just need to make sure they find the evidence." A slow smile spread across Adrian's face. "That's devious. That's practical. You said you wanted someone who could think strategically." I did. I just didn't expect you to be this good at it. He leaned back in his chair. How long do you need? Give me 3 days. If I can't find proof by then, we'll try something else. 3 days. But Alara. His voice turned serious. Be careful. Vincent's dangerous when he's cornered, and the Kozlovs don't forgive betrayal. If they figure out you're manipulating them, they'll come after you. Let them try. She left the office with Vincent's file and a renewed sense of purpose. This was what she'd been missing in Adrian's world before. Actual work, real challenges, problems that required intelligence instead of just looking pretty and staying quiet. For the first time since agreeing to come back, she felt like she'd made the right choice. Her first stop was the Northside warehouse Vincent had been using. Alara drove there in the Charger, which probably wasn't the smartest choice for discreet surveillance, but she wasn't ready to give up her car for something practical. The warehouse sat in an industrial area that looked abandoned except for the occasional truck rolling through. She parked half a block away and watched through binoculars she'd borrowed from Adrian's security team. Over the next 2 hours, 3 trucks came and went. 2 were from Adrian's fleet, which made sense. The third was unmarked but had Volkov Transport's logo partially visible under a fresh coat of paint. Sloppy. Vincent was getting careless, which meant he felt protected. Alara snapped photos with her phone, documenting license plates and shipping containers. Then she waited until dark and broke into the warehouse through a side door that had a lock so old she could have picked it with a hairpin. Inside, the space was exactly what she'd expected. Rows of shipping containers, some open, most sealed. She moved through the shadows quietly, checking manifests, looking for anything that would prove Vincent was stealing from the Kozlovs too. She found it in a locked office at the back. The safe was basic, the kind you bought from a big box store and thought was secure until someone with actual skills showed up. Alara had it open in under 5 minutes. Inside, she found ledgers. Real paper ledgers, because apparently Vincent didn't trust digital records. Smart, actually, since digital left trails. But paper could be photographed. She spread them out on the desk and started shooting pictures. The numbers told a clear story. Vincent was rerouting product from Kozlov shipments too, reselling it through his own contacts and pocketing the difference. Over 6 months, he'd stolen almost $500,000 from the Russian organization. This was exactly what she needed. Alara was putting the ledgers back when she heard voices outside. Male, speaking Russian, getting closer. She froze, her heart kicking into overdrive. If they found her here, there wouldn't be any talking her way out of it. She killed her phone's flashlight and moved toward the window, but it was painted shut. The voices were right outside the office door now. No time to hide, no time to run, no good options. Then one of them laughed, and the voices started moving away, heading deeper into the warehouse. Alara waited until she couldn't hear them anymore before slipping out of the office and making her way back to the side door. She was almost there when she heard footsteps behind her. "Hey, who are you?" Alara ran. Behind her, someone shouted in Russian. She hit the door at full speed, burst out into the night, and sprinted for the Charger. Footsteps pounded after her. She threw herself into the driver's seat, jammed the key in the ignition, and the engine roared to life. In her rearview mirror, she saw 2 men emerge from the warehouse. One of them raised a phone, already calling someone. Alara punched the accelerator and didn't slow down until she was 10 blocks away, her hand shaking on the wheel. That had been too close, way too close. But she had what she needed. Back at her apartment, she downloaded the photos and started building a case file. The evidence was damning, clear proof that Vincent had been stealing from the Kozlovs for months. All she needed now was to make sure they saw it. She called Adrian. "I've got the proof." That was fast. Vincent keeps paper records in the warehouse. Very detailed paper records that show exactly how much he's been stealing from our Russian friends. How much? Almost 500,000. Adrian whistled. They'll crucify him. How do we get them the information without making it obvious we're involved? Alara had already thought about that. Anonymous tip. I'll create a fake email account, send them photos of the ledgers with GPS coordinates for the warehouse. They'll think it's coming from inside Vincent's own organization, someone who's tired of his shit and wants him gone. That could work, but there's a risk they'll investigate the source. Let them. The email will route through 6 different servers in 3 countries. By the time they trace it, they'll hit dead ends. Alara pulled up her laptop. I'm sending it now. Give them 48 hours to verify the information and act on it. And if they don't, then we move to plan B. But they will. This is personal for them. Vincent made them look stupid. She hit send and sat back, feeling the adrenaline finally start to fade. Her hands were still shaking slightly from the close call at the warehouse. She'd been lucky tonight. Lucky the men had moved away instead of toward her. Lucky she'd gotten out before they could identify her. But luck ran out eventually. She needed to be smarter, more careful. Her phone rang. Marco's name flashed on the screen. She'd forgotten that Adrian had given her a new phone with numbers for his entire organization programmed in. Yeah? It's Marco. Adrian said you were handling the Vincent situation. That's right. Good. Because I've been wanting to put a bullet in that prick for months. Marco's voice was rough. But there's something you should know. Vincent's been meeting with someone outside the Kozlov organization. I've had people watching him, and twice in the past week, he's met with a guy we can't identify. Always in public places, always brief conversations. Ilara sat up straighter. Could it be another buyer? Someone else he's stealing for? Maybe. Or it could be something worse. Like what? Like someone inside Adrian's organization feeding Vincent information. A mole. The words hit her like cold water. A mole meant someone close to Adrian was working against him. Someone they trusted. Do you have any proof? Nothing concrete, just a feeling, but I've been in this business long enough to know when something's off. Marco paused. Watch your back, Vance. If there's a traitor in the organization, they might see you as a threat. Thanks for the warning. After Marco hung up, Ilara sat in the darkness of her apartment, thinking. A mole made sense. Vincent wasn't smart enough to pull this off alone, and he'd been too confident about getting away with it. Someone had been protecting him, feeding him information about security protocols and audit schedules. The question was who? She pulled up the employee files Adrian had given her and started reading. There were 43 people in Adrian's inner circle, everyone from Marco and Vincent at the top to various lieutenants, accountants, and security personnel. Any of them could be the mole. Or none of them. She could be chasing shadows. 2 days passed. Ilara spent them reviewing files, tracking financial records, and trying to build a picture of who had access to the information Vincent would have needed. The list of suspects narrowed to 6 people, but she couldn't rule any of them out completely. On Wednesday evening, Adrian called her to his office. The Kozlovs moved on Vincent this morning, found him at his apartment, dragged him out, and from what my contacts tell me, he won't be a problem anymore. They killed him. They made it very clear that stealing from them is a fatal mistake. The body won't be found, but Vincent Chen is officially retired from the business. Ilara should have felt satisfaction. Instead, she just felt cold. She'd orchestrated a man's death without pulling a trigger herself. It was efficient and smart and exactly what needed to happen. But it still made her someone who killed people with spreadsheets. You did good work, Adrian said, watching her face. I know it's not easy the first time. I'm fine. Liar. You're thinking about what this makes you. He was right, but admitting it felt like showing weakness. I'm thinking about the mole. Marco called me. Said Vincent had been meeting with someone, possibly someone inside the organization. Adrian's expression shifted from sympathetic to sharp. Marco told you that? Yeah, is it true? It's possible. I've had suspicions for months that someone's been leaking information, but I haven't been able to prove it. He pulled out a file. These are the people who had access to the information Vincent used. 6 names. Ilara took the file and opened it. The 6 names matched her own list exactly. Have you investigated them? Carefully, nothing definitive yet. Adrian leaned forward. This is sensitive, Ilara. If word gets out that I'm looking for a traitor, they'll go underground and we'll never find them. It has to be handled quietly. You want me to investigate your own people. I want you to find out who's trying to destroy what we've built. Can you do that? It was another test. Another chance to prove she belonged in this world. Ilara looked at the names on the list. People who worked for Adrian, who smiled at him in meetings, who pretended loyalty while plotting his downfall. Yeah, she said, I can do that. Over the next week, Ilara became someone she didn't entirely recognize. She attended meetings with Adrian's lieutenants, asking questions that seemed casual but were designed to probe for inconsistencies. She reviewed security footage, looking for patterns. She even went to dinner with Marco and his wife, studying him for signs of deception. Everyone seemed loyal. Everyone seemed trustworthy, which meant someone was very good at lying. The breakthrough came on a Thursday night. Alara was reviewing financial records in her apartment when she noticed something strange. One of the 6 suspects, a woman named Sarah Chen, who handled Adrian's legal affairs, had made several large deposits to her personal account over the past year. The amounts weren't huge, 10,000 here, 15,000 there, but they were consistent and unexplained. Alara dug deeper. The deposits always came 2 days after major shipments or significant deals. Someone paying Sarah for information. She called Adrian. I think I found something. Sarah Chen's been receiving regular payments from an offshore account. Are you sure? The timing's too consistent to be coincidence, and the account traces back to a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands. Can you find out who owns the corporation? Give me a day. It took her 18 hours of digging through corporate records and calling in favors from people in Reina's network who specialized in financial investigations. But finally, she found it. The Shell Corporation was owned by Dmitry Kozlov. Sarah Chen was working for the Russians, had been for over a year feeding them information about Adrian's operations, helping Vincent steal, and probably planning something bigger. Alara called Adrian immediately. Sarah's the mole. She's been working for Dmitry Kozlov since last year. There was a long silence on the other end. You're absolutely certain? I've got paper trails, bank records, everything. She sold you out. Son of a bitch. Adrian's voice was cold. Sarah's been with me for 5 years. She's handled every major legal deal, negotiated contracts, sat in on confidential meetings. Which means the Kozlovs know everything. Your suppliers, your routes, your security protocols, all of it. We need to move on this now, tonight. If Sarah realizes we're onto her, she'll run straight to Dmitry. What do you want me to do? Meet me at the office. We're going to have a conversation with Sarah about career choices. An hour later, Alara stood in Adrian's conference room while Marco brought Sarah in. The lawyer looked confused at first, then wary when she saw both Adrian and Alara waiting. Is something wrong? Sit down, Sarah. Adrian's voice was pleasant, which somehow made it more terrifying. Sarah sat, her hands folded in her lap, her expression carefully neutral. What's this about? It's about the $350,000 you've received from a Cayman Islands shell corporation owned by Dmitry Kozlov. Adrian slid bank records across the table. Care to explain? Sarah's face went pale. For a moment, Alara thought she might deny it. Then her shoulders slumped. How long have you known? Long enough. Why, Sarah? You were making good money, had a secure position. Why sell me out? Because you're going to lose. Sarah's voice was bitter. The Kozlovs are expanding into Chicago, and they're not asking permission. I saw which way the wind was blowing and made sure I'd land on my feet when your empire collapsed. So it was just survival. What else is there, loyalty? Please, you'd throw any of us away the moment we stopped being useful. Adrian's expression didn't change, but Alara saw his jaw tighten. What did you tell them? Everything. Suppliers, routes, security systems, financial structures. I gave them a roadmap to take you apart piece by piece. Sarah looked at Alara. And who's this? The racing wife who suddenly decided to play gangster? You think bringing her back changes anything? Watch your mouth, Marco growled. Why? What are you going to do? Kill me? Go ahead. Dmitry will retaliate, and you'll start a war you can't win. Adrian stood slowly. You're wrong about that. We're not going to kill you. That would be wasteful. Then what? You're going to help us. You're going to feed the Kozlovs false information, lead them into a trap, and when this is over, you're going to disappear with your life intact. That's the deal. Sarah laughed, but it sounded strained. And if I refuse? Then we give the Kozlovs proof that you've been skimming from them too. Funny thing about embezzlers, they can never resist stealing from everyone. Adrian nodded at Alara. Show her. Alara pulled out another set of records. These were fabricated, carefully constructed to show Sarah stealing from the payments the Kozlovs had been giving her. It was entirely fictional, but it looked real enough to convince someone who wanted to believe it. Sarah's face went from pale to gray. That's not real. Doesn't matter. Dmitri will believe it's real, and that's all that counts. So you have two choices. Help us, or we hand you to the Russians with evidence that you betrayed them too. The room was silent. Sarah stared at the fake records, her hands trembling. Finally, she looked up at Adrian with hatred in her eyes. What do you want me to do? Tomorrow, you're going to tell your Kozlov contact that we're moving a major shipment through the port of Chicago on Saturday night. You'll give them exact times, locations, security details, everything they need to plan an ambush. And then? And then they'll walk into a trap, and this war will end before it starts. Adrian's smile was cold. Welcome to the consequences of your choices, Sarah. I hope the money was worth it. After Marco escorted Sarah out, Alara found herself alone with Adrian. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed her one. That was risky, she said, using Sarah to bait a trap. It's the only play we have. The Kozlovs think they have the advantage because they've had inside information for a year. Taking that away isn't enough. We need to make them overconfident, make them commit to an attack they can't win. And if Sarah warns them it's a trap, she won't. Not if she thinks we'll hand her over otherwise. Fear is a powerful motivator. Adrian drank his whiskey. Besides, we'll have people watching her. If she tries to run or make contact outside what we've scripted, Marco will handle it. Alara thought about Sarah's face, the fear and hatred in her eyes. A week ago, that woman had been a respected member of Adrian's organization. Now she was a weapon they were pointing at their enemies. This is what you meant about being surgical, Alara said. Using the infection to kill the disease. Exactly. You're learning fast. I had a good teacher. She set down her glass. What happened Saturday? Saturday, we end this, one way or another. Saturday night arrived with fresh snow and temperatures cold enough to hurt. Alara stood in a warehouse near the port of Chicago, watching Adrian's people prepare for the ambush. They'd spent 2 days setting it up, positioning shooters, rigging explosives, creating escape routes. Nothing was being left to chance. Sarah had played her part perfectly, feeding the Kozlovs information about a fictional shipment worth millions. If everything went according to plan, Dmitri's people would show up expecting an easy target and walk into hell instead. If things went wrong, they'd all be dead by midnight. You don't have to be here, Adrian said, appearing beside her. This is going to get violent. I know. That's why I'm staying. Alara, don't. I helped create this situation. I'm seeing it through. He studied her face for a moment, then nodded. Stay behind cover. When the shooting starts, keep your head down. These aren't street racers. They're professionals, and they won't hesitate to kill you. I'll be careful. At 11:47 p.m., headlights appeared in the distance. 3 SUVs, moving slowly toward the warehouse. Alara felt her heart rate spike. This was it. The vehicles stopped 50 yards from the entrance. Men climbed out, 8 of them, all armed with automatic weapons. They moved with military precision, spreading out to cover different angles. Adrian watched through binoculars from the second-floor office. That's not all of them. Dmitri's too smart to commit everyone to a first wave. He's testing our defenses. So what do? We let them get closer, make them think they're winning. The Russians advanced. Alara could see their faces now in the warehouse lights, hard men who'd done this kind of thing before. They reached the main door, and one of them placed a charge. Now, Adrian said quietly into his radio. The lights went out. For 3 seconds, the warehouse was completely dark. Then spotlights blazed to life, blinding the Russians. At the same moment, Adrian's people opened fire from elevated positions. The Russians dove for cover, returning fire, but they were exposed and outnumbered. 2 went down immediately. The others retreated toward their vehicles, laying down suppressing fire. That's when the trap closed. 2 of Adrian's trucks roared out of side streets, blocking the Russians' escape route. More shooters appeared, surrounding the Kozlov team completely. The gunfight lasted 90 seconds. When it was over, 6 Russians were dead and 2 were wounded badly enough that they wouldn't be fighting anyone soon. Adrian's people had taken casualties too, 1 dead, 3 wounded. But the ambush had worked. Marco was already on the phone with Dmitri Kozlov, delivering a message Alara couldn't hear from where she stood. When he hung up, he looked at Adrian and nodded. He wants to talk. Tomorrow, neutral ground. Good. We'll negotiate terms. Adrian surveyed the carnage in the warehouse. Clean this up. I want it sanitized before sunrise. As his people moved to handle the bodies and evidence, Adrian found Alara leaning against a wall, her hands shaking. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her hollowed out and shaky. "You okay?" "I just watched people die." "I know, first time is always the hardest. Does it get easier?" "No, it just becomes familiar." He put a hand on her shoulder. "You did good tonight. This wouldn't have worked without your investigation, without finding Sarah. Tell that to the families of the men who died. Those men chose this life, same as we did. They knew the risks." Adrian's voice softened. "But if this is too much, if you want out, say so now. No judgment, no consequences. You can walk away." Alara thought about it, really thought about it. She could leave, go back to racing, find a life that didn't involve body counts and betrayal. It would be easier, cleaner, but it would also mean giving up the power she'd fought so hard to claim. "I'm not walking away," she said finally, "but I'm not becoming what you were either. If this partnership is going to work, we do things differently, smarter, less blood when possible." "Agreed. I'm tired of wars anyway. They're expensive and bad for business." They stood together in the warehouse, surrounded by the aftermath of violence, and Alara realized something had shifted between them. They weren't enemies anymore, weren't even just allies. They were partners, flawed, dangerous people who'd found a way to fit together when nothing else made sense. It wasn't love. It might never be love. But it was something real, built on respect and shared ambition instead of control and fear. And maybe that was enough. The meeting with Dmitry Kozlov took place in a restaurant in River North that had been cleared for the occasion. No other patrons, just armed men positioned at every exit and two crime lords sitting across from each other like they were negotiating a corporate merger instead of a ceasefire. Alara sat beside Adrian, watching Dmitry with the kind of careful attention she'd learned to apply to anything dangerous. He was older than she'd expected, maybe 60, with gray hair and a face that suggested he'd seen worse things than this and found them boring. "You cost me 8 men, Dmitry said in accented English, his voice conversational. "Good men, expensive men." "You cost me 1, Adrian replied, "and you've been stealing from me for a year through Vincent Chen. I'd say we're not even close to even." Vincent was a businessman. He saw opportunity and took it. But Vincent was a thief who got what thieves deserve, and your nephew's company was complicit in the theft, so let's not pretend this is about honor or business ethics. Dmitry smiled slightly. "Direct. I appreciate this. Too many people in our position dance around the truth." His eyes shifted to Alara. "And you're the famous wife who disappeared and became someone else. Nix, they call you in the racing circuit." "They call me a lot of things." "I'm sure they do. You've caused quite the disruption to Adrian's life. First you leave, then you return as his partner instead of his property." "Very modern." Dmitry poured himself vodka from a bottle his men had brought. "My wife would never dare such a thing. She knows her place." "Then your wife lacks imagination," Alara said. Adrian shot her a warning glance, but Dmitry laughed. "Perhaps. Or perhaps she simply understands that power comes in many forms, not just the obvious ones." He drank his vodka in one swallow. "But we are not here to discuss wives and their choices. We are here to discuss the future. You ambushed my men. I could retaliate. You could retaliate for my retaliation. This continues until we both bleed money and resources, or we could be intelligent and find another solution." "I'm listening," Adrian said. "Chicago is large enough for both of us. But we need clear boundaries. You keep the south side and western suburbs. I take the north side and northern suburbs. We split the loop based on business type. You keep entertainment and protection. I keep shipping and distribution. No crossover, no conflict." "And what about the port?" "Shared territory. We each move our own product, but we coordinate schedules to avoid complications with authorities." Dmitry refilled his glass. "This gives us both what we need without constant war." Adrian was quiet for a moment, considering. Alara could see him working through the implications, weighing costs and benefits. Finally, he said, "What about your nephew's company? Volkov Transport stays out of our territories entirely." "Agreed. He finds new markets or he fails. Not my concern." "And you guarantee no retaliation for what happened at the warehouse. Clean slate from this point forward." "If you guarantee the same, your people leave my operations alone." Adrian extended his hand across the table. "Deal." They shook on it. Two men who'd been ready to kill each other 24 hours ago, now acting like reasonable business partners. Alara watched the exchange and felt something like relief mixed with disgust. This was how their world worked: violence and negotiation, death and compromise, all part of the same conversation. As they stood to leave, Dmitri paused. A word of advice, if you'll permit an old man's perspective. That woman beside you is more dangerous than you realize. Not to you, perhaps, but to your enemies. They will underestimate her because she is young and beautiful, and they are stupid. Use that. Let them make mistakes because they cannot see what she is. And what is she? Adrian asked. Dmitri looked at Alara with something that might have been respect. The kind of person who survives when everyone else dies. I've seen this quality before. It's rare and it's valuable. Don't waste it by making her into something she's not. After Dmitri left with his security team, Adrian and Alara sat alone in the empty restaurant. The weight of what they'd just accomplished settled over them slowly. That's it? Alara said. We just shake hands and the war is over? For now. These agreements last until someone decides to break them. Could be years, could be months, but it buys us time to consolidate our position and deal with other problems. Like Sarah. Like Sarah. Adrian's expression hardened. She served her purpose, but she's a liability now. She knows too much and she's proven she can't be trusted. What are you going to do with her? Marco's handling it. She'll disappear quietly, no drama, no body that leads back to us. It's cleaner that way. Alara should have objected, should have argued that killing Sarah was excessive or wrong. But the truth was, she couldn't find the energy to care. Sarah had made her choices, and those choices had consequences. Just like Alara's choices had consequences. Just like everyone's choices did in this world. I want to restructure how we move product, she said instead, changing the subject to something productive. The old routes are compromised because of Vincent and Sarah. We need new protocols, different suppliers, better security. Agreed. How long do you need? Give me 2 weeks. I'll build something that's actually sustainable instead of held together with duct tape and hope. Adrian smiled. You really hate how I was running things before, don't you? Your operation was a mess. Profitable, but sloppy. You relied too much on personal relationships and not enough on actual systems. That's why Vincent could steal for 6 months before anyone noticed. Fair point. So fix it. I'm giving you full authority over transportation and logistics. Build it however you want. Over the next 2 weeks, Alara rebuilt Adrian's shipping operations from the ground up. She brought in Reina's crew to help. People who understood discreet transport and didn't ask uncomfortable questions. She implemented new tracking systems, hired drivers who were loyal to her instead of to Adrian's old network, and created protocols that would catch theft or betrayal before it cost them millions. It was exhausting work that left her sleeping 4 hours a night and surviving on coffee and takeout. But it was also satisfying in a way nothing else had been. She was creating something, building systems that would outlast any individual person's ambitions or betrayals. Marco watched her work with obvious skepticism. You're bringing in a lot of new people, he said one afternoon, reviewing her hiring proposals. How do we know we can trust them? We don't, but that's why we have oversight and auditing procedures. Trust is earned over time, not given blindly because someone seems loyal. Adrian's always relied on personal loyalty. And look where that got him. Vincent, Sarah, and probably others we haven't found yet. Alara marked up another document. I'm building something that works whether people are loyal or not. Systems, not faith. Marco shook his head but didn't argue further. He was smart enough to recognize that she had a point, even if he didn't like the implications. The transformation didn't happen smoothly. There were setbacks and complications, people who resisted the changes because they preferred the old way of doing things. Alara dealt with each problem as it came up, sometimes with logic and sometimes with threats, learning which tool worked best in each situation. Adrian watched from a distance, giving her space to work, but remaining available when she needed him. Their relationship had settled into something functional and strange. Partners who trusted each other professionally, but maintained careful emotional distance. They had dinner together most nights, discussing business and strategy. They attended events as a united front, presenting the image of a powerful couple. But they slept in separate apartments and never talked about what they'd been to each other before. It worked because neither of them wanted anything more complicated. A month after the meeting with Dmitri, Ilara was reviewing shipping manifests in her office when Adrian knocked on the doorframe. "You need to see something," he said, his expression unreadable. She followed him to the conference room where Marco was waiting with a laptop. On the screen was surveillance footage from the warehouse district, the same area where Ilara had broken into Vincent's operation weeks ago. "What am I looking at?" "This was taken last night," Marco said, playing the footage. "We've been monitoring the area since we took over those warehouses from the Kozlovs." The video showed a woman approaching one of the buildings. It took Ilara a moment to recognize her, Sarah Chen, who was supposed to be dead. "I thought you handled Sarah," Ilara said quietly. "I did." Marco's voice was grim. "I personally confirmed she was dead and disposed of the body. That was 3 weeks ago." "Then who the hell is that?" They watched as the woman on the surveillance footage picked the lock and entered the warehouse. She moved with confidence, like she belonged there. 20 minutes later, she emerged carrying a bag and disappeared into the night. "It's not Sarah," Adrian said. It's her sister, Lauren. Apparently, Sarah had been training her as a backup in case things went wrong. They look enough alike that in low light, you'd mistake them." Ilara's stomach dropped. "So Sarah's dead, but her sister knows everything she knew. And she's been accessing our files, stealing information, probably planning to sell it to whoever will pay." Adrian closed the laptop. "This is my fault. I should have made sure Sarah didn't have any family who could become a problem." "You can't think of everything. In this business, you have to. One mistake, one loose end, and it all falls apart." Marco cleared his throat. "I can handle this, same as before." "No." Laura surprised herself by speaking up. "Let me talk to her first." Adrian frowned. "Why?" "Because killing her makes us look weak. Sarah dies. Now her sister dies. That's a pattern. That's fear. But if we can turn Lauren into an asset, flip her loyalty the way we tried with Sarah, then we're showing strength instead of desperation. And if she refuses, then Marco handles it. But let me try first." Adrian and Marco exchanged a look. Finally, Adrian nodded. "You've got 24 hours. After that, we do this the permanent way." Finding Lauren Chen wasn't difficult. She was staying in her sister's old apartment in Wicker Park, apparently not smart enough to realize that was the first place anyone would look. Ilara showed up alone at 9 p.m., knocked on the door and waited. Lauren answered with a gun in her hand. She looked like Sarah, same features, similar build, but younger, maybe 25, with fear in her eyes that her sister had learned to hide better. "You're Ilara Vance. Adrian's wife. Partner, actually. Can I come in?" "Why would I let you in?" "Because if I wanted you dead, I wouldn't knock. I'd just have Marco kick down the door and finish this quick." Ilara kept her voice calm. "I'm here to talk. That's all." Lauren hesitated, then stepped aside. The apartment was barely furnished, just temporary housing for someone who wasn't planning to stay long. Smart, actually. "Your sister worked for us," Ilara said, sitting down uninvited. "Then she worked for the Kozlovs. Then she became a liability, and we removed her. I assume you know all this." "She told me what she was doing, said if anything happened to her, I should finish what she started." "And what was that? Getting revenge? Stealing enough information to sell to competitors? What's the endgame here, Lauren?" "Making sure you people pay for killing my sister." Ilara nodded slowly. "I understand that impulse. Really, I do. But let's be realistic. You're one person with limited resources going up against an organization that's been doing this for years. You might cause some damage, maybe even hurt us financially, but eventually you'll make a mistake and we'll find you. And when we do, Marco won't be as patient as I'm being right now. So you're here to threaten me. I'm here to offer you a choice. You can keep trying to avenge Sarah and probably die in the process. Or you can work for us, use your skills productively, and actually make something of your life." Lauren laughed bitterly. "You want me to work for the people who killed my sister?" "Your sister betrayed her employer and got caught. That's not murder, that's consequences. She knew the risks." Ilara leaned forward. "But you didn't make those choices. You're not responsible for what Sarah did, so I'm offering you a clean slate, new job, good pay, and you get to live. All you have to do is prove you're smarter than your sister was. And if I refuse, then you become a problem, and problems get solved. Permanently." Lauren sat down across from her, the gun now resting in her lap. What would I be doing? Same thing Sarah did. Legal work, contract negotiation, due diligence, except you'd be doing it for me instead of for Adrian, and you'd be doing it honestly. Alara pulled out a contract she'd prepared before coming here. I'm building a new division focused on legitimate business operations, transportation, logistics, consulting. I need someone who understands corporate law and isn't afraid of complicated situations. Why me? Because you're desperate enough to take risks and smart enough to know when you're beat. Those are useful qualities. And because I believe in second chances, even though I probably shouldn't. Lauren read through the contract slowly, her expression skeptical but interested. The salary is generous. It's what the job's worth. I don't underpay people and then act surprised when they steal from me. Alara stood. You've got until tomorrow morning to decide. Sign that and leave it with the building manager, and we'll set up your first day. Don't sign it, and Marco will be here tomorrow night. Your choice. She left before Lauren could respond, walking back to her car with her heart pounding. She'd just made a huge gamble, offering Sarah's sister a job instead of eliminating a threat. It could blow up spectacularly, but it could also work. The next morning, she found the signed contract waiting in her office with a note attached. I'm smarter than Sarah. I won't make her mistakes. Alara smiled and filed the contract away. One more piece falling into place. 3 months passed. Chicago winter gave way to a cold, wet spring that made everyone miserable. Alara's reorganization of Adrian's transportation network was complete, running more efficiently than it ever had. Lauren Chen turned out to be exactly as competent as her sister, but without the betrayal issues, handling legal work with the kind of aggressive competence that made opposing lawyers nervous. The truce with Dmitry Kozlov held. There were occasional tensions when operations got too close to boundary lines, but nothing that couldn't be resolved through conversation rather than violence. And Alara herself had become someone she barely recognized from the woman who'd worn emerald silk and smiled on command. She was ruthless when she needed to be, compassionate when it served a purpose, and strategic about everything. People in Adrian's organization stopped calling her Adrian's wife and started calling her by her name, sometimes with respect and sometimes with fear. Both worked fine. She was in her office one afternoon when Adrian knocked and entered without waiting for permission. He'd been doing that more often lately, treating her space as shared territory. She'd let it slide because picking battles was exhausting and this one didn't matter. We have a problem, he said, sitting down across from her. Actually, you have a problem. I'm just the messenger. What kind of problem? Danny's in trouble again. Alara's stomach clenched. Her brother had been quiet for months, staying out of trouble after the disaster that had led to her marriage in the first place. If he was back in debt, if he'd made another stupid decision, what did he do? Nothing illegal. He's just broke and about to lose his apartment. Medical bills from a car accident last month ate through his savings. Adrian handed her a folder. I thought you should know before someone else steps in to offer him money he can't pay back. Alara read through the documents. Hospital bills, insurance denial letters, eviction notices. Danny had been struggling and hadn't told her, probably because he felt guilty about everything that had happened before. Why are you telling me this? Because you're his sister, and I thought you'd want to know. And because I remember that you sacrificed everything for him once. Figured you'd want the chance to help him without it costing your freedom this time. It was a surprisingly thoughtful gesture from someone who didn't usually bother with sentiment. Alara looked at Adrian carefully, trying to figure out the angle. What do you want? Nothing. This isn't a manipulation. I'm just giving you information. He stood. But if you're going to help him, do it smart. Don't just throw money at the problem. Make him earn it. Make him prove he's learned something. Otherwise, you're just enabling him to make the same mistakes again. After Adrian left, Alara sat with the folder for a long time. She could pay off Danny's debts easily now. She had money, resources, power. But Adrian was right. Just fixing the problem wouldn't actually help her brother. She called Danny that evening. He sounded surprised to hear from her. Alara, Jesus, I haven't heard from you in months. Are you okay? I'm fine. I heard you're having financial trouble. Silence on the other end. Then, quietly, how did you know? I have resources now. Good ones. She took a breath. I can help you, Danny. Pay off the medical bills, cover your rent for a few months while you get stable, but I need you to do something for me in exchange. What? Get your life together. Find a real job. Stay away from gambling. Prove you're not going to end up in this situation again. I'll help you now, but this is the last time. Next time you fall, I'm not catching you. Elara, I'm sorry. For everything that happened before, I don't want apologies. I want you to be better. Can you do that? Yes, I can do that. Good. I'll wire you money tomorrow. Use it wisely. After she hung up, Elara felt something she hadn't felt in months, a kind of lightness. She'd been carrying guilt about Danny for years, feeling responsible for his mistakes. But this conversation had shifted something. She could help him without sacrificing herself. She could care about him without being destroyed by his poor choices. It felt like freedom. That evening, she met Adrian for dinner at a restaurant downtown. It had become their routine. Once or twice a week, they'd meet to discuss business and pretend they were normal people having normal meals instead of crime bosses planning operations. I talked to Danny, she said over wine, told him I'd help, but that this was the last time. Good. You can't save people who don't want to save themselves. You sound like you're speaking from experience. I am. I've tried to help people before. Most of them just took the money and made the same mistakes again. He paused. But you're different. You actually learned from your situation. That's rare. I didn't have a choice. It was learn or die. Everyone has a choice. You chose to survive instead of giving up. That's not nothing. It was the closest thing to a compliment Adrian had given her in weeks. Elara didn't know what to do with it, so she just drank her wine and changed the subject. I've been thinking about expansion. The legitimate businesses are doing well enough that we could branch into other cities. Build a real transportation network instead of just Chicago operations. You want to grow this, don't you? Or are you content just maintaining what we have? Adrian smiled. I'm never content, but expansion means more risk, more exposure, more chances for things to go wrong. It also means more profit and more stability. Right now, we're dependent on Chicago staying friendly. If Dimitri changes his mind or someone else moves into our territory, we're vulnerable. But if we have operations in 5 cities, losing one doesn't destroy us. You've really thought about this. It's my job to think about this. That's what you hired me for. Fair point. He considered it. All right. Put together a proposal. Cities, costs, timeline, everything. If it makes sense, we'll move forward. Elara felt a surge of excitement that she tried to hide. This was what she wanted, not just to manage Adrian's existing empire, but to build something bigger, something that would outlast both of them, something that was genuinely hers. Over the next month, she threw herself into planning the expansion. She researched markets, identified opportunities, built financial models. Lauren helped with the legal framework. Reina's crew provided insights into underground transportation networks in other cities. Even Marco contributed grudgingly, pointing out security concerns that Elara hadn't considered. When she finally presented the proposal to Adrian, it was 70 pages of detailed analysis and strategy. He read through it over 2 days, occasionally calling her with questions or challenges. When he finished, he called her into his office. This is good work. Better than good, actually. If we pull this off, we'll double our revenue in 2 years. That's the goal. But it requires significant upfront investment, and it means trusting people in other cities to run operations without constant oversight. That's risky. Everything's risky, but calculated risks are how you grow. Adrian was quiet for a moment, studying her face. You've changed so much from the woman I married. Sometimes I look at you and don't recognize who you've become. Is that a problem? No, it's just unexpected. I thought I knew what I wanted when I married you. Control, stability, someone who'd fit into the life I'd built. But you never fit. You were always too big for the space I tried to put you in. Elara didn't know how to respond to that. It felt too honest, too vulnerable for the professional distance they usually maintained. I'm approving the expansion, Adrian continued. You'll oversee the whole thing, build the teams, set up operations, make it work. This is your project. Thank you. Don't thank me, just don't screw it up. He smiled slightly. And Elara? For what it's worth, I'm glad you came back. Not as my wife, but as my partner. It's better this way. Yeah, she said quietly. It is. The expansion took 6 months to implement fully. Elara spent weeks traveling to Milwaukee, Indianapolis, Detroit, building networks and establishing operations. She hired locally, trained managers, created systems that could run without her constant supervision. It was exhausting and exhilarating. She was building an empire of her own, using Adrian's resources and reputation, but making it into something uniquely hers. And it worked. Within a year, the expansion was profitable. Within 2 years, it had exceeded every projection she'd made. Adrian's organization, their organization now, had transformed from a Chicago crime operation into a legitimate multi-city transportation business with a few illegal side operations that nobody talked about. 3 years after Alara had walked out of the Drake Hotel in a torn dress and stolen car, she stood in front of a room full of business partners presenting quarterly results. She wore a suit that cost more than her old apartment's monthly rent. Her hair was cut short now, professional, no longer trying to look like someone's decorative wife. Adrian sat in the back of the room, watching her work the crowd with the confidence of someone who'd earned her place instead of being given it. When she finished the presentation to applause, he caught her eye and nodded slightly. After the meeting, they stood together on the balcony of the downtown office, looking out over Chicago. The city spread before them, glittering and cold and full of possibilities. "You've built something remarkable," Adrian said. "This whole operation, everything you've created, it's impressive." "We built it, together." "No, I provided resources and got out of your way. You built it." He turned to face her. "And I need to apologize for something, for how I treated you before, for not seeing who you were until you forced me to look. That was 3 years ago. I've moved past it." "Have you? Because sometimes I think you're still angry, still carrying that around." Alara thought about it honestly. Was she still angry? Not really. She'd been furious once, consumed with rage at being treated like property. But somewhere along the way, the anger had burned itself out. She'd taken everything Adrian tried to keep from her, power, respect, autonomy, and made it hers. Revenge through success instead of destruction. "I'm not angry anymore," she said finally. "But I'm not grateful either. What we have now, this partnership, it works because we're equals. The moment that changes, the moment you try to control me again, I'm gone. And this time I'll take half the empire with me." Adrian laughed. "I wouldn't expect anything less. And honestly, I wouldn't want you to stay if things went back to how they were. This version of you is infinitely more interesting. This was always me. You just never bothered to look. I know. That was my mistake." He extended his hand. "To continued partnership?" Alara shook his hand. "To continued partnership, and to staying out of each other's way when necessary." "Deal." They stood together on the balcony as the sun set over Chicago, two people who'd destroyed each other and rebuilt something functional from the wreckage. It wasn't a love story. It probably never would be. But it was a story of transformation, of taking the worst situation and refusing to let it define her. Alara thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago, silent and suffocating in emerald silk. That woman was dead, killed the night she overheard Adrian dismiss her as empty and lifeless. In her place stood someone harder, sharper, more dangerous. Someone who raced cars under assumed names and built business empires, and made men like Dmitry Kozlov treat her with respect. She'd been a statue once, decorative and silent. Now she was the storm they'd all underestimated. And she was just getting started. 5 years after leaving the Drake Hotel, Alara stood in the garage of their Chicago headquarters, watching mechanics work on a new fleet of vehicles she'd commissioned. The Charger sat in the corner, retired from active racing but kept pristine because it meant something to her. A reminder of who she'd been and how far she'd come. Danny stopped by occasionally, clean now, working a steady job, finally stable. He'd apologized 100 times for the choices that had led to her marriage. She'd forgiven him eventually, not because he deserved it, but because holding grudges was exhausting and life was too short. Raina's crew had integrated into Alara's legitimate operations, running security and specialized transport. Spider had stopped looking at her with suspicion. Kelsey sent her a Christmas card every year with a note that just said, "Told you not to let him reshape you." Marco had become something like a friend, or at least a trusted colleague. Lauren Chen ran their legal department with ruthless efficiency and genuine loyalty earned through respect instead of fear. And Adrian had kept his word about the partnership. They worked together, argued regularly, occasionally agreed on things. He'd started dating someone, a doctor who had no connection to their world and didn't ask uncomfortable questions. Alara was genuinely happy for him, which felt strange but not unwelcome. She'd started seeing someone too, a woman she'd met at a business conference who owned a legitimate shipping company and thought Alara's past was fascinating instead of terrifying. It was casual, uncomplicated, everything her relationship with Adrian had never been. Life was good, not perfect. There were still threats, still competition, still moments when everything could fall apart. But it was hers, built on her terms, answering to no one's expectations except her own. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Adrian approaching with 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," he said, handing her one. "Thanks." She accepted it, and they stood together watching the mechanics work. "I've been thinking about opening an operation in New York." "Of course you have. You're never satisfied." "Would you be?" "No. That's why we work well together." He sipped his coffee. "New York's expensive and complicated. You sure you want to take that on?" "I'm sure. I've already got contacts there, and the market analysis looks good." "Then do it. Just keep me updated." They were quiet for a moment, comfortable in the silence. Then Adrian said, "You know, I used to think power meant controlling everything around you. Every person, every situation, every outcome. But watching you these past few years, I've learned something different." "What's that?" "Real power is knowing when to let go. When to trust other people to do their jobs without micromanaging. When to step back and let things unfold instead of trying to script everything." He looked at her. "You taught me that. By refusing to be controlled, by building something I couldn't take credit for. You showed me what partnership actually means." Alara didn't know what to say to that. It was the most honest thing Adrian had said to her in years, maybe ever. "We both learned something," she said finally. "You learned to share power. I learned that taking it doesn't make you a villain. It just makes you smart." To being smart, then. They touched coffee cups and a makeshift toast, 2 people who'd almost destroyed each other and somehow ended up building something better instead. That night, Alara drove the Charger through Chicago's streets, not racing, just moving through the city she'd claimed as hers. She passed the warehouse district where she'd first returned to racing, past the Drake Hotel where her marriage had finally broken, past the safe house in Bridgeport where she'd learned to survive. All the places that had shaped her were still there, permanent markers of her transformation. From invisible wife to street racer to criminal strategist to legitimate businesswoman, each version of herself building on the last. She'd been so many people in 5 years, but for the first time she felt like all those versions had finally integrated into someone whole. Someone who could be ruthless and compassionate, strategic and reckless, powerful and vulnerable. Someone who didn't need anyone's permission to exist. She pulled the Charger into the parking garage of her downtown apartment and sat for a moment in the silence after the engine died. Tomorrow she'd start planning the New York expansion. Tomorrow she'd have meetings and negotiations and 100 decisions to make. But tonight, she was just Alara Vance, the woman who'd refused to stay dead when someone tried to bury her. And that was enough. She climbed out of the car, locked it, and walked toward the elevator. Behind her, the Charger sat waiting, ready for whenever she needed to remember who she'd been and what she'd survived. The statue had broken 3 years ago. The ghost had haunted Chicago's underground for weeks. The partner had built an empire over years. Now there was just Alara, complicated, imperfect, powerful, and finally, completely herself. The elevator doors closed and she ascended into the life she'd chosen, the life she'd fought for, the life that was entirely and unapologetically hers.